Recently, a scandal erupted in Ukraine after a priest in the city of Zaporizhia refused to carry out a funeral ceremony for a 2-year-old child who had been tragically killed. The problem? The priest was from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, and the boy had been baptized in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kyiv Patriarchate. The incident has created the impression that Ukraine is divided along theological ground. And indeed, since the start of the war, Russian-Ukrainian war in the Donbass in 2014, the politics of religion has grown more complicated. Increasingly, some Orthodox churches are moving from the Moscow to the Kyiv Patriarchate. But religion in Ukraine is far from not a divide. Different faiths and sects coexist in the country. To discuss religion in Ukraine, we are joined by Andriy Yurash, Director of the Department for Religious Affairs and Nationalities of the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine, and a well-known expert on religion. Thank you for joining us. But before the discussion, we would like to suggest you watch our report on how some churches are moving from the Moscow Patriarchate to the Kyiv Patriarchate. Hromadske traveled to Western Ukraine to talk with residents of 2 towns where such moves have occurred and learned more about the controversial what had been caused.
In the beginning of January 2018, a priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate refused to perform a funeral service for a child who was baptized at a Kyiv Patriarchate church. He explained that his decision followed church laws. This case provoked a huge reaction across Ukraine and sparked discussion across relations between the 2 Orthodox churches. Ukraine's Ministry of Culture says that around 80 communities in 20 Ukrainian regions have switched from Moscow to Kyiv Patriarchate between 2014 and 2017. The largest number of switches took place in Ternopil and Rivne regions. So we go to Ternopil to get a first-hand account of how and why believers from both churches divide the local church buildings between themselves. This is Butin, Ternopil Oblast. In 2014, 330 out of 460 believers switched from Moscow to Kyiv Patriarchate here. Andriy Yurash, the current head of Butin, says that it was the Euromaidan events that were the last straw.
A Moscow Patriarchate priest refused to perform a funeral service over the people who died at Euromaidan. It was a remembrance day and the priest refused it just like that.
Did he explain the decision?
He said that he didn't know whether there were any Orthodox believers among them. Maybe they were Greek Catholics, or maybe they weren't baptized at all. He said he just won't do it. They didn't request the service in the right way, he said. 80% of the village was offended by this case, and the next day they started coming in to say that they wanted to switch. We won't serve Moscow when our boys are dying, they said.
The Moscow Patriarchate representatives were offered to take up the house next to the church, but they refused this offer and went to court.
There were many court cases, and all of them were won by us, the Kyiv Patriarchate, so they saw where it was all going. We appealed to many institutions, but in the end they just started building their own church.
The local believers say that the Moscow Patriarchate representatives use their own resources to build it.
We're building it. There are 60 households in Butin, and they did not switch. They just seized them, smashed the doors, broke into here, and started performing their services.
We are now in Novostav, Ternopil region. This is where one of the first in the region church switches from Moscow to Kyiv took place in 2014. Despite there being numerous court hearings and fights, they agreed to serve in turns.
When someone wants to be political, they start referring to Euromaidan, Crimea, and Putin, but that's all politics, and we do religion here, so when someone switches churches on these grounds, it doesn't make sense to me. We go to churches to pray not for Putin, not for Russia. We pray to God, we confess our sins. That's just absurd. Moreover, since 1991, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is fully independent from Moscow, both financially and administratively. We don't pay any taxes or anything to them.
Since time immemorial, the church has always been like this. We crossed ourselves, we married, and so on. So why should we switch now? There are many churches out there, enough to be switching on a daily basis. And everything that was going on here, it was terrible. They broke in, they used force and offended everyone. We haven't got anything to do with Putin. Who is he to us? Do we look like Muscovites?
An hour later, the representatives of Kyiv Patriarchate come in.
Everyone perfectly understands what's going on in the country, and they know who the occupant is. It's just absurd to have the church under the Moscow jurisdiction. People want to hear their language here.
The whole village, apart from 11 houses, signed up to switch to the Kyiv Patriarchate. At the moment, everything is calm here. Thank God. Of course the village is divided. That's an unpleasant subject to me because I didn't want it to be like this.
Ternopil Regional Administration says that at the moment there are no conflicts between the communities. Any decision to switch is made through the administration according to the Ukrainian law.
All the decisions have been made at the general meetings between the communities. The community made the decision, we prepared the documents. Afterward, we made all the amendments here at the regional state administration. The court hearings are still ongoing, but I can tell you, some settlements in Ternopil region are already building new churches. They make requests, the local governments provide them with land, they use the money from donations. It's all down to the people, donations, sponsors, benefactors.
As of January, there are currently 4 cases on moving from the Moscow to Kyiv Patriarchate.
So, Andriy, we watched the report. What does it signify? What should our foreign audience understand from what's going on?
This fact, what you described, what happened in Zaporizhia, is just one sign of the very high temperature inside the religious environment of the country, and the process of changing the jurisdiction and moving from one patriarchate to another one. That is a very big and broad process which is taking place very actively for last several years. At least 3 or 4 years we are counting almost in different form and on different stages hundreds of cases related to this process. In other cases, this process on the stage of very active discussion, sometimes on very conflictual level. And exactly any state official cannot be silent in this situation. That's why we are trying to prepare some our suggestions. How can regional authorities can solve these problems, and that's why inside the expert council affiliated with our department of the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine, we prepared the draft of special law. It is trying.
What we will suggest, if to be very brief.
Briefly, we suggest that the member of this community collect together, discussing the situation, and according to the decision of the majority, community and the whole property which belong to the community will go to one or another jurisdiction.
What I would like to draw our attention, we have here a map. You can see what percentage of Ukrainians belong to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate and Kyiv Patriarchate. As everywhere we see, from the west to the east, north and south, predominantly there is more believers of the Kyiv Patriarchate.
At the same time, we can count that according to the number of existing and acting institutional organizations, the communities, what are registered according to the Ukrainian legislation, Moscow Patriarchate can great majority. Now we have in the country around 12,000 communities that belong to the Moscow Patriarchate in the country. Ukrainian Orthodox Church in the canonical subordination to the Moscow Patriarchate. And totally around 6,000 parishes or religious organizations belong to Kyiv Patriarchate and Autocephalous Church. So, excuse me, but it's very important for my mind. The number of parishes is much higher affiliated with the Moscow Patriarchate, but at the same time, the number of believers is 2 times bigger to the Kyiv Patriarchate. And that's why people is trying to change the affiliation of their institution from Moscow Patriarchate parishes toward the Kyiv.
So actually, because of that, I would like to ask the particular that you see the Kyiv Patriarchate, Moscow Patriarchate, then the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, these are the 7%, as well the Roman Catholic Church, it's among 1% of Ukrainian believers, and others. What I understand, the others includes the Muslims, Jews, and different other sects, and Buddhist, and all the New Age faiths. Andriy, my question would be, of course, for a lot of people, especially what we've seen from the reports, the Moscow Patriarchate, really has the connection to Russia, to the Kremlin, because really there is it's not a secret that there is a strong political influence of the Kremlin to the Moscow Patriarchate. At the same time, we know that there are some believers who could be considered by somebody, even the Ukrainian nationalist, who just believes in genuinity of that particular church and may still stay with the Moscow Patriarchate. But with the war, how political is that, and how politics plays into today's religion? Is it really the divide, or what word you would use?
That picture, what we are discussing right now, has been stated first time, I remember, at the end of even 1990s. So that's nothing absolutely new. But political situation of the last several years, especially the Ukrainian-Russian war in the eastern borders of the country, exaggerated this process.
But would we speak about the religious divide as a political instrument, as a political reality?
Unfortunately, these two directions of Orthodoxy, I mean, subordinated toward Moscow and toward Kyiv Patriarchate, have very different political views. Sometimes they have even different identificational priorities. The first one, closely related to Moscow, has obviously pro-Russian and Russian identity. In Armenian Orthodoxy, which under the jurisdiction of Kyiv Patriarchate, now has more pro-European view. And
so, in order to explain the how it plays to the whole society, we also prepared, using the sources which are quoted on our webpage, how religious is generally the population. So what we see that the half of the Ukrainians are moderately religious, 28% unsure, could be likely a believer, 5% unsure, likely not a believer, and we have 7% of deeply religious people, some of them, a small percentage didn't answer it, and 9% atheist. So in the way, would you really say, according to what we know, is Ukrainian society religious society? To what extent, generally, having all that amount of religious plays to the everyday life of the Ukrainians?
everything is very relative. If we will compare with the situation in the Ukrainian society like 20, 25, 30 years ago, exactly Ukrainian society becoming more and more religious. But if we compare the situation with other countries, for example,
can you compare with some European and maybe
for example,
Russian?
Poland, Italy, Ukrainian society is much less, almost in 2 times less religious.
Compared to Russia?
Much more religious, but if we will take the most unreligious societies like Czech one, Estonian, other Baltic states, the level of religiosity in the country in 2, even in 3 times higher than in these countries.
To which country Ukraine could be compared, and what this, let's say, diversity, or somebody would use the word divide, signifies, how Ukraine could be explained through that land?
Diversity in religious area, as in other areas, is a part of our heritage, and I think very important. Religious diversity in the country influence other areas, for example, the political area. Very hard to compare with other countries in Europe because the situation in Ukraine very unique for the Eastern Europe, very different from Western Europe, and according to the principle of organization of relation between the state and the religious organization, we can be compared with the American system because Ukraine provides real religious freedom and support diversity in any forms. In the difference toward Russia, for example, when the main Russian Orthodox Church always support this unique and totalitarian view on other religions. the system of differences among religions in Ukraine, it is a reason why we have this unique perception and understanding of others as our neighbors, as my neighbors, as your neighbors.
And a smaller but also an important Christian faith in Ukraine is Protestantism. Since the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Protestants have come to play a greater role in supporting the Ukrainian military and helping civilians affected by war. We know also that a lot of them had to move from now currently occupied DNR and LNR, where some of the Protestants were not welcomed. We would like to show the report and then discuss it.
The front line is the most interesting place. In civilian life, there are problems, disagreements between priests from different sects. Here on the front line, everyone gets along fine: Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant. We're going to pick up our guys, missionaries in Avdiivka who are serving and helping the local population. Who's in charge here? Does anyone know her?
Tanya knows.
Grandma Valia, give us an empty bag. We'll give you some potatoes.
He visited me.
In the winter after the shelling.
He visited me.
A day or two later, we were here. How did you make it through the shelling?
I'm telling you, son, I sleep there. It was already 8 in the evening. I didn't understand anything. Then whoosh! Everything shuddered, the wind started blowing. All the windows and doors opened and the wind started blowing again. As I was getting up, everything here was open. I had such beautiful flowers, but everything froze.
The window was blown off by a shell in the winter. Now they've covered it with plastic sheeting. The glass was blown out, so we covered that with a rug. Okay, no need to escort us any further. Close the door. We're heading out. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Donbass is a region where the Protestant communities were in majority according to the number of institutions registered by the state. So that was the region where 6 to 8% from the population were the members of this community, comparing to 3 in the scale of the whole country. So Ukraine, contemporary, modern, independent Ukraine created the circumstances for Protestant communities to develop their identity. That's why they define Ukraine as real, their motherland. That's why they became Protestants in the region. The most active part of that part of population that opposed to the Russian aggression. That's why they were staying for Ukraine as a country and as a circumstance for their development for the future. As a state, which offered for them absolute possibilities for development and the process of evangelization, what is the most important for any Protestant.
So, Andriy, thank you so much. Andriy Yurash is the director of the Department for Religious Affairs and Nationalities of the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine and a well-known expert on religions. But before I'm saying goodbye, we also encourage to go to Hromadske Facebook page, Hromadske International, and also to our webpage, en.hromadske.ua, where you can find the full version for our stories and also the stories and the full version of the reports on the situation with the religion in our region. Thank you.